remember her and her family. And then, of course, we know here Sharon Nolan is in John Peter Smith. Is she still in the hospital? Does anybody know?
Yes.
She is still. And Ruby Jordan apparently still has bronchitis or is trying to recover from that. I probably need to check on her again. Has somebody been in touch with her? Okay. And of course, Nancy Giles still has pneumonia, still requests prayers, and then Chris Fry for his brother-in-law, and Eric Chapman for his family, the LaMelle family, who has, and his niece who have COVID, and of course Isaac Ramos. We want to continue to remember them, and Deborah, Merwar, request prayers. And also Eric is dealing with some health issues. Of course, we know about Chris Fry recovering from surgery, and then here are all of the people undergoing chemotherapy and radiation. You want to keep those in your prayers. And then Jackie Brotherton's niece, and then everybody that's on that list. And then let's go to some good news, and I'll come back to Ukraine, okay? Good news, I guess you would say, are coming up. Tomorrow night, Gary will start a class in the auditorium on 1 Corinthians, and I know how much study and work he's put into that. He's really worked hard on that to make it a good class. So I hope y'all will be there and or at least pick it up on online if you can't be there, because he doesn't do anything halfway. Okay, baby shower. Yeah, and it is kind of odd to think of Travis with the itty bitty one, you know. Now, when they get up to be a toddler, and he can throw them around and all like that, you know. But I'm pretty sure it will be, you know, when he. And of course, we had the shower last Sunday for Stephanie and Nalu, and I was teasing Stephanie. I said, "Boy, she never really looked very pregnant with Nalu boy, but she looks very pregnant right now." And she said, and of course we remember that Nalu boy was just barely over 5 pounds. Mm-hmm. This one already weighs 7 pounds. So, but I think this little girl is deciding she's going to have to put up a fight against Big Brother, so she's staying in there. She's going to be a heavyweight for him. But wedding shower coming up also for Nolan and Maddie, and then the wedding for Amber and Cameron. That's going to be March 19th. Boy, we've got a lot of things going on here. And that will be at the church in Roanoke. Okay, now I was planning to tell you about this. I hope all of you picked up one of these newsletters that Terry Harmon sent. Terry lives in South Dakota, but he lived in Moscow for several years, and then came home, and then went back to Ukraine and lived there for several years. And in fact, the first 2 or 3 times at least the first 2 times that we were in Ukraine, in Kramatorsk, we stayed with Terry. And then when the school moved to Garlovka, we could stay in the school building, or sometimes in an apartment that they found that was vacant. But those Soviet era apartments are, well, Motel 6 is a lot higher up than those. but it was at least a place to stay. I told some of y'all this, the first night we were there, and this one I was taking a bath, and they had this tub that was on, on the claw feet, freestanding tub, and the towels were lying on a little bench over there, and so I reach over to get a towel, and the tub did this, and I had to stable it back, and I thought, wouldn't that have been fun to have? But then we've also stayed a time or two in sometimes a student would say, well, I can go stay with my parents during that week, and you can stay in my apartment. So it's been a little bit better, but that one was quite interesting that we stayed in. But anyway, to get back to this, Terry stays in touch with all these people. And in fact, I just got a text from Gary, and that's probably why I couldn't get a couple that we know really well, Albert and Irene, and they have a little girl. Irene does a lot of the translating of materials for the school, and also she works some with Eastern European missions as a translator, and we're in Slavyansk, which is a major city in the east, and they didn't want to leave. You don't want to leave your home, but they finally decided they needed to leave, and so we have been praying for their safety, and Gary just sent me a text, said Albert is safe. So I don't know exactly where he is right now, but at least he is safe. Probably he is in the western part of Ukraine or with some of these brethren here. But at any rate, here are some things about, this is mainly, Terry had been sending us, I'm sorry I'm rambling, but Terry had been sending us just an update on each day of what was going on, and because he had been in contact with the people there. And this one is mainly, this was what he called day 5. We got this yesterday, and this is mainly regarding the students and teachers that many of us know, telling us what is going on. Dennis, down there at the bottom of the page, actually it's Denise over there, but Dennis, who's director of our program there, is in Ternopil, and other members from the Bilasirka church are there with him, and Stas, who works in Lviv, let's see, he's taken a large number of Christians who are trying to flee to the west. And then it tells a little bit more about different ones. And also I get an email from a friend who lived in Ukraine and worked with the Sunset group over there. And she tells me a lot about what's going on with the people they know, and I send her what's going on here. But you may Kharkov or Kharkiv is what they've been saying. That's Kharkov. It's the way we've always said it. And Kiev have been hardest hit. And I want you to remember, I'm sure you can't remember her last name, just remember Olena in your prayers. Olena is one of our math professors at TCC, and she's from Ukraine, she's from Kharkov, and her parents are trying to get out, and she's been working with, trying to help them. She sent us all an email just thanking us for prayers and thoughts and concerns, and she mentioned that she had 4 sleepless nights. Now, and she's still trying to teach her classes there at TCC. And I sent her the information because she said she was going to try to put together a group that could send money and supplies to Ukraine. And I just sent her this link that John had in here of the Kakelman work. And then I also sent her Terry's note right here that has where they can send money, and just told her that these were credible places, because she said, if you know any credible charitable organizations, let me know. And so I jumped in right quickly. I thought, I would let her know about that. And I also told her that Christians all throughout the world were in prayer and also trying to help in any way they could. And I mentioned to her too that we had people in Poland that were reaching out, and we have Christians in Poland who are reaching out and saying, yes, you can stay in our church building, or we'll get you food, and even though the church is small in Poland, they're reaching out and doing what they can, which is a good thing. But you may have seen in the news today, and of course, Ukraine is 9 hours ahead of us, okay? So it's not there, and all, but you may have seen in the news the 40-mile long convoy that's headed toward Kyiv. They're going to have some problems, because people are standing, making Molotov cocktails. The little grandmothers are making Molotov cocktails and passing them off to the, and there's just a lot of things. And why are they doing that? That's their home. And also, since the fall of the wall and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Ukraine has been one of the satellites of that time that has developed more rapidly, and also, as I mentioned last week, that has so much mineral wealth and agricultural wealth, so much more than some of the other satellite countries. And that's why, one of the reasons Putin wants it. I saw this morning on the news that a news reporter asked the previous president of Ukraine, said, what is Putin going to do next? He said, Putin doesn't even know what he's going to do next. He didn't think he was going to meet this kind of resistance. But but I think about at times when I'm sitting there in my lazy boy, my friends are leaving their homes, and and fearing for their lives. But back to Elena, she is trying to get her parents out, and I was going to tell her that if she had time to give me more information about them, that I might have contacts who could help with that. But let's just remember her. And also, we have 2 other teachers in the math department that are from Ukraine, and one, her name is I could say it this morning and now I can't, Slavana, something like that. And she said her family is in a small town, so they're not, right in major harm's way. But she said, even my 80-year-old mother is going to fight for her home. So there is a resolve there, but we just don't know what's going to go on. But we do know God hears and God cares. That's the thing that we do know. And that's just on my heart today. And by the way, this is from Ukraine. And every day until this thing is settled, I'm wearing something from Ukraine because it may not match. This does match my outfit today, but things may not match my outfit all the time, but they match my heart. And so I'm going to do that. But and here, I want to, the last paragraph down there of the whole thing has the this church you can mail things to. Not everybody feels good about or even knows how to send money online. But here is a church. In fact, this church, when we're sending money to the translators and all like that, and we've helped several of them over there, when we do that, that's the church that we send them through. And they have the ability to get the money there, and you can know that all of the money is going to go there. Some of these other organizations, they take out some for, the cost of sending it there and so on. But, I didn't intend to talk that long about it. But anyway, just keep those people in your heart and in your prayers. And I'm just glad to know that Albert and Irene are safe. That had been a really big concern. I've been going to their Facebook page and going to, I don't spend much time on Facebook, but I've been going to everybody's page that I could find over there to try to see if I could find out what was going on. And I haven't done a whole lot other than teach that class, study this a little bit, and then try to just be concerned about our brothers and sisters over there and then about others. And I know you are too. And if it's okay, I'll just lead the prayer. This Heavenly Father, you who made this world and everything in it, everything that we need for physical life is in this world. And everything we need for spiritual life is in your greater creation in the church. And we thank you for that. And we praise you for that. And Father, there are many on our prayer list. You know their needs. And we pray for them regularly and still do. But Father, today we're especially concerned about Julie and her family. Just bless them and help this event that has been so traumatic to them, perhaps pull them together and pull them back to you. And bless Julie and help her to be a comfort and a light to them. And Father, you know our hearts. And you know my heart. And that I'm really concerned about our brothers and sisters in Ukraine, but I know all these women are too. For even though they haven't seen them in person, they have seen them through my eyes. And they feel and hurt for them too. And we just pray that you'll continue to be with them and help them to also remember that you are with them and that you care. And bless our brethren all over the world who are reaching out to help them. And Father, you know that Elena is a work friend of mine, and I pray for her that you can give her peace, and for her family, for her parents, that they can get to safety. And Father, we don't know how this is all going to turn out, but we do know that you hear and you care, and that as long as we strive to be faithful to you, that good can come in some way. And so we leave it in your hands. And just help us to now focus on your word and your love. In Jesus' name. Yeah. Before I get down and let Jean lead us on, I happened to think of one other thing as I was, before I left, and that I mentioned to Gary. Putin was a member of the KGB. Russia was an atheistic country for so long. This can be a teaching point to your children. You know, I've read a book by some atheist and even read Richard Dawkins' book on the God delusion, and I've read this other one, I can't remember the writer, but he was an atheist, and the title of it was Good Without God. That we can be good without God. But both of them ignore the fact that they came up through a culture that had been influenced heavily by biblical principles and by God. You know, Richard Dawkins grew up in England. He's British. And this other guy grew up in America. He was surrounded by more goodness. Putin, that is what godless men, godless leaders will do. And that may be a teaching point. It's one that I'm looking at with my children. That is what godless people do. Remember Hitler? He tried to use the church at times, but he was not. He wanted to go back to the pagan religions of Germany. Mm-hmm. And then what did one of his guys say, you know, in 1935, said in 10 years, the name of Adolf Hitler will replace the name of Jesus. And in 10 years, the name of Hitler went down. Kind of like this former president of Ukraine said, he was telling how many Russian soldiers they had killed, and that, of course, we can't know for sure, but he said 5,000 Russian soldiers have gone to hell today. So anyway, take that, and Jean is going to lead us a song, and we're going to focus now on the Word.
First, I want to
Oh, yeah.
better scale, give a report on Barbara Connolly. We went yesterday and spent most of the day with her. She loves for you to come and eat lunch with them. Mm-hmm. And she is doing well. She has had COVID, just like most of us. Mm-hmm. And but she is back in her own room now. She was spent a month or so, I think, in the COVID unit. But she's happy. She is, and we can report that she is doing well now. The song that I picked for this morning is 462. 462. And of all the songs on faith, I felt this one this morning touched my heart. For a faith that will not stray, oppressed by every foe, that will not tremble on the faith that shines more bright and clear, when tempest rage without, but when it brings you knows no fear, in darkness feels no doubt. Lord, give us such a faith as this, and then whatever may come, we'll taste in Him all the bliss of an eternal home.
That is a good song. We can sing that every time. Another good thing I wanted to remember, then we'll get into this. I had mentioned to you guys about Lenore, the student that I had that I had given my books to, and that she was real excited about them. She and I had lunch together Thursday, and we visited, and Lenore is a certified teacher for new converts to the Anglican religion. And she was so excited about my book, she said, I don't have the authority to decide, but I'm giving your books to the person who is in charge of their Bible classes to say, everybody in this church needs to read these. And she has this thing, they have, devotion, discipline, doctrine, and dogma. And she was saying we can differ some on doctrine, and that's okay. But dogma is what separates us. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, but well, and dogma is what has the authority of God and the church. You see, and of course they're closer to the Roman Catholic Church than they are to any. Because the Anglican religion actually comes out of the Church of England. You can go back and it's real closely related to the Episcopal Church too. But anyway, let's see, how is it? All dogma is doctrine, but not all doctrine is dogma. Now, that's like. All isosceles triangles are triangles, but not all triangles are isosceles. And isosceles triangles are the ones that have two. Okay. Anyway, I'm used to it. Are all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares, okay? And get that? All squares are rectangles. And that's kind of how they separate it out here. I'm doing some study and learning on that because we're going to get together again. We're getting together, as friends. I'm trying not to just jump on everything and unload the whole thing at once. But I think we can get there. I think we can get there with her. Or at least I'm hoping that we can, and I've been praying for her, so remember her, Elena and Lenore. Okay, we finished up on Abraham. So we got through about verse 19. And then, so we'll go through these others. And by faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. But Isaac was deceived. And in our minds, it looks like he blessed the wrong person. How could he do it by faith if he was deceived? Just ask him.
Well, he didn't know he was deceived until after he had blessed Jacob.
Yeah, he didn't know. Could he have changed the blessing?
Yes.
Probably.
Yes.
When he found out? But what did he do? He didn't change the blessing. Why?
He trusted God.
Yeah, he trusted God in that because he saw God's overruling hand in all of that. He was going to bless Esau. Why? Because he liked what Esau's gained. You know, what was Esau doing when his father was old? He was trying to butter him up. He was trying to get Isaac to bless him. But what had he done with the blessing?
He sold it.
He sold it,
He gave it away.
and he despised it. But then he decided he wanted it. And also, who had said to Rebekah that, you know, hadn't God said something to Rebekah? Yeah. Now, that overall statement was not so much about just the boys themselves, but about the nations that would come through them. But this is something that I get really frustrated at some of the Bible class material that's out there, because it focuses so much on the deception and the lying. And children, you're not supposed to deceive people. You're not supposed to lie. Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. You're not supposed to do that. You know, God's not condoning that. He's just telling you how it happened. You know, He's just telling you how it happened. First of all. Secondly, what the material will say later, you know, is how you know, Esau wanted to kill Jacob, and well, that was a bad thing, but wouldn't you want to kill him too? You know, it's kind of, he had stolen your blessing, and so it puts everything on. And then later, when they meet, you know, Jacob's afraid of his brother when they meet later, but then the emphasis there is always on Esau was so good he forgave his brother. Well, he did forgive him. But Esau had a bunch of wealth then, because he didn't get the main promise. He didn't get the main blessing, but he did get a blessing of wealth that he would have. And you see the emphasis of Esau was that he wanted stuff. You know, it was a physical. And the other thing that we forget, the two guys were brothers. They were twin brothers. They had grown up together all this time. You know, yeah, they had this split, and, you know, you can see that in families sometimes. I've seen that in families, but then later, time passes, things, you know, and you think, oh, hey, we're family. And so but anyway, Isaac blessed them, and he did it by faith because he did not change the blessing. He could have, but he didn't, and that's in Genesis 27. Now, look at 21, verse 21. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning on his staff. And you remember how he blessed them? Who was the oldest? Manasseh. And Ephraim was the youngest. And he puts his right hand on Ephraim and his left hand on Manasseh. And Joseph says, no, you do it this way. And Jacob said, no, it's this way. He did that by faith. He set Ephraim above Manasseh. And he did that by faith in God. And you will see throughout the history of Israel, of the northern kingdom, you'll see the northern kingdom referred to many times as Ephraim, and sometimes the whole nation referred to as Ephraim. And in fact, at Hosea 11, where God says, how can I give you up, O Ephraim? I taught you to walk. I laid food before you. I took care of you. So he's referring to the nation there under that name. And then look at verse 22. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, and that's in Genesis 50, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel and gave instructions concerning his bones. And you probably remember that too, don't you? Did Joseph say, if you guys leave Egypt? What did he say?
When you leave.
When you leave. There's a big difference between if and when, isn't it? When expresses faith that God is at work and that God is going to do something. And what he said, he said, take my bones with you. I don't want my bones to stay here in Egypt. Take my bones with you. And we read in Joshua that they did and that they buried it there in the land. And then we're all familiar with Moses. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a beautiful child. And, well, every child is beautiful. I'm glad my mother is not alive to tell you that, no, that's not true. She cried when she saw me and didn't want to take me home because I was so ugly.
Oh, gosh.
And my
You'll have
dad,
to show us a baby picture sometime.
there is one that she would show me to prove her point. And my grandmother said the photographer didn't know how to make pictures of babies. But my daddy said, let's take her home. Maybe she'll grow out of it. So guess which parent was my favorite? Okay. But anyway, that was just a aside, okay? But they were not afraid of the king's command. What did Pharaoh commanded? Every male child was to be what? Killed. And they were not afraid of that. And then Moses, you know, of course, we remember how Pharaoh's daughter found him and brought him up in Pharaoh's household. So Moses, when he came of age, though, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. That is, he refused that position, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. Notice, esteeming the reproach of Christ. Was Christ with them in the wilderness wanderings? Was he with them in the crossing of the Red Sea? And in the observance of the Passover and so on? Okay. And this example is used a whole lot to contrast the Christian life, the walk by faith in God, and the seeming pleasures of sin. Because don't the pleasures of sin usually pass away? Yeah, when you die, it's all gone. You know, as we've always heard, there's no such thing as a U-Haul trailer behind a hearse. You know, you can't take anything with you. And if you threw all of your money from your bank account into that coffin, it's just going to rot. Mm-hmm. And so all of those passing pleasures of sin, yeah, you can enjoy that for a while. Mm-hmm. You know, I may have mentioned this before, but I had a good friend in southern Louisiana, and her husband worked for PPG. He was kind of up in the higher-ups in the company, and they would have a Christmas party every year, and Billy and Sylvia had to go, you know. And they didn't drink, but just about everybody there was drinking and getting, you know. And she would lean over and whisper to Billy, she said, you know, you and I are the only ones that are going to know what we did tonight, tomorrow, you know. Tomorrow morning, we're the only ones that will know what we did tonight. And that is true. And the others thought they were having a good time, but not so. Okay. And by faith Moses forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Now he had to flee right at first, didn't he? And sometimes God works in strange ways, doesn't he?
Very strange.
And this is one thing, Gene Coffey said this to me a few times, that one of the most underrated things is the providence of God. God's providence is still at work. And it was at work then. Because Moses had to leave right at first, but then later when he comes back in the strength of God, doesn't he? After 40 years discipline in the desert, then he comes back at 80 years old to lead God's people out of Egypt. I don't know if I could do that. But God was with him again. God was with him and helped him. And then by faith he kept the Passover. And you know, that is one of those things that would seem strange maybe to the people at that time. They've been about 400 years, I think it was, in Egypt. And had been in slavery for that long, and they hadn't been able to offer sacrifice. But he kept the Passover with it. That was the very first Passover. And he was not destroyed, you know, and he was the firstborn, so he would have been destroyed, as well as, I think he was the firstborn. Yeah, because then Aaron and Andrew. And then by faith, what did they do? They passed through the Red Sea. They were, what happened to them there? Were they all that faithful when they came to the Red Sea? I mean, were they all that excited to, why they looked back and what was there? An army, and then they looked forward and there was a water, food. But what did God do? Took that cloud he'd been leading by, moved it back where the army couldn't get to them. Does God protect his people? Mm-hmm. And that was a miraculous protection. But does God protect his people today when we're faithful to him, when we're striving to do his will? Yeah. And then, they were saying, Moses, what'd you do? You brought us out here to be killed out here. Why didn't we just stay as a slave? Are we that way sometimes? Why didn't we just stay where we were? But Moses said, be still and see God's salvation. And the sea opened up. It just opened. And they all passed through. Now, we do have some brethren, I hate to say, who say, well, they didn't really cross in the Red Sea. They crossed in this little bitty puddle over here called the Sea of Reeds. Mm-hmm. And they based that on some kind of translation of some little Hebrew something or another. But that same little Hebrew word with the same little scribble on it is used later to describe where Solomon had his ships. Would Solomon have a lot of his ships in a little bitty puddle over here? No. Okay. So that settles that. Some brethren wanted to say that, and I've forgotten who it was I heard say this, said, well, which is the bigger miracle? To divide the real Red Sea and have the people pass through on dry land, and then to close in on Pharaoh's army, or to have the people cross at a little wadi or puddle area, little stream, and then to kill all of Pharaoh's army in that little stream. Yeah. Sometimes people want to take miracles out of the Bible And no, you can't do that. So all the Egyptians were drowned. Now I want you to think about, too, a shadow of salvation. You had over here, first of all, you had the Passover lamb that was slain and the blood that was placed on the doorpost. So you have that. Then you have them coming out of Egypt. Do you think they were happy there coming out? Yeah. In fact, they plundered all of the Egyptians, didn't they? They came out with a lot of wealth and everything. But when did they rejoice? When were they really, really, honestly saved from all that mess?
After they crossed the Red Sea.
After they crossed the Red Sea. And you read in, I think it's Exodus 15, about the joy and rejoicing. The horse and the rider he has killed in the sea. Now, think about this. Many of our friends want to say that, yes, I see that Jesus died for my sins. Now I accept that, and I'm following Jesus. Many of our friends mistake the joy right there for a complete salvation. They weren't really saved until they got across that Red Sea. And you and I weren't really saved. You know, I remember being happy when I decided I was going to follow Jesus, but I wasn't really saved until I crossed the water. And so I think you see a shadow there of our salvation. You see a shadow of our salvation there. And everything, the enemy was destroyed in the Red Sea. What does God do when we're baptized? Yeah. God works to throw all of those sins. The enemy is destroyed right there. Now, once they got across the Red Sea, did they still have to be obedient? Yeah. Once we are baptized, do we still have to be obedient? Yeah. Okay. But just wanted you to see that little shadow thing there. Okay. All right. Let's just look at all. I think we can finish up this by going rather quickly here because some of this you're aware of. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell. How many times did they have to go around it? 7 times, 7 days. And then on the 7th day, they had to go around it 7 times. Well, how would you like to have been in Jericho and looking out and seeing this?
What do you think they're doing?
Yeah. What do you think they're doing? And then also, what did Rahab say to the spies though that came to her? What did she say about what the people in Jericho knew?
We know about your God.
The fear of you, we've heard about you, and it's scary. We're afraid of you. And then, of course, she asked that they save her and her family, but she still had to do something, didn't she?
Mm-hmm.
And here again is one of those things that people use sometimes to say, oh, if you teach about Rahab, you're teaching situation ethics, and you're not supposed to do that. But suppose, does anybody in here, Marcia, you have a 2-story house, don't you? Yeah, okay. Suppose you're upstairs at night, and suppose a robber breaks in, and Bob is in the living room. And this robber says, is there anybody else in this house? Do you think Bob's going to say, yeah, my wife's upstairs? You know. I've just kind of wondered about that. But she hid the spies, And she sent the people out, said, oh, I think they went that way. And then she took the spies and said, now, you go this way. And you know, people have trouble with that. Well, what was she doing? She was working by faith. And they told her also. Maybe at first she was working out of fear, but then they say to her, put that scarlet cord out the window and you'll be safe. So she had to do that. But it says here, by faith, Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe when she had received the spies with peace. And then he talks about all these other people. He says, I don't have time to tell you about everybody else, but he mentions Gideon. Gideon didn't seem to have very much faith right at first, you know, that fleece he wanted changed each time, he wanted a sign. And then God tells him that he's got too many in his army. And but Gideon did have the faith that it took. Barak, what do you know about Barak?
Well, he wanted Deborah to go with him.
Yeah. So he didn't have a whole lot of faith. She did.
She did, but he didn't.
And she said, well, if I go out with you, the glory is going to come to a woman. And do you remember what happened then to the leader of the, you know, he comes in and this woman said, oh, yeah, you can take a rest in my tent. And then while he said, sleep, what you do with the tent spike? Woo! I heard Jody Apple on this, and we'll get to this in just a minute. I heard him talking about the book of Judges. He said it, when he was a kid, he just loved that book because it was everybody, you know, all of this. You see that there's a lot of blood, guts, and gore in the book of Judges. But the people had started, you know, going away from God, and he would raise up then someone to help them and to save them. Jody did make the point that these leaders were more military leaders than they were spiritual leaders. But didn't they have to have some faith to take up that military leadership? But what about Samson?
Not exactly the best choice in women.
Yeah, he didn't make a very good choice in women. And he was a little strong-willed and selfish. But could God use that?
Yeah. Yes.
And there's one thing that I think this lets you know is that God can use very imperfect people. Are you perfect? Don't think so. But can God use you? Jephthah. What do you know about Jephthah?
He promised God he'd sacrifice whatever came
Mm-hmm.
out after the battle.
Mm-hmm. And what came out?
His daughter.
Oh, and that's that's always been a one that's been battled around, and I was listening to Jody Apple had 2 lessons about Jephthah, and that was, and he's a preacher on the other side of the Mississippi, he's a really good student of the Word too, and anyway, he really thinks that Jephthah offered his daughter physically. My grandfather thought that too. I don't necessarily think that.
I don't think so.
And the reason I'm thinking here, one thing I'm going to say before I say that, we remember Jephthah's stupidity there, don't we? What does a Hebrew writer remember?
His face.
His faith. You know? What does God want us to remember? His faith. Now, when you read about Jephthah's daughter, she says, in fact, we might need to go over there. I remember most of this, but some of this I may get confused. Into the book of Judges, wherever it is, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, okay, there we are. She asked him, let's see, okay, it's got to be back over here. She asked him, yeah, here it is in chapter 11. There's a whole lot more about Jephthah than just that, that you could read in just about all of chapter 11 is related to Jephthah. But at any rate, it's in verse 29 that he makes this vow to the Lord. If you will indeed deliver the people of Ammon into my hands, then it will be that whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in peace from the people of Ammon shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering. Now, I've read somewhere that, and I've forgotten where, but I have this note here, that the Hebrew word that we have translated "and" there, shall surely be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering, could also be translated "or." I don't know. But I've read that by people who know that. But anyway. But, you know, here he says, whatever comes out of my house. He didn't say whoever, did he?
Yeah.
So he probably wasn't thinking about a person at all. And at any rate, then what happens? So he defeated them, and then we come on to verse 34. And notice what it says here. She came out in about the last part of verse 34. She was his only child. Besides her, he had neither son or daughter. Okay. And then in verse 36, she says, my father, if you have given your word to the Lord, do to me according to what has gone out of your mouth, because the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the people of Ammon. And then she said to her father, let this thing be done for me. Let me alone for 2 months, that I may go and wander on the mountains and bewail my virginity, my friends and I. And he said, go. And he sent her away for 2 months. And she went with her friends and bewailed her virginity in the mountains. And it was so at the end of 2 months that she returned to her father, and he carried out his vow with her, which he had vowed. She knew no man. Okay. She had to still be alive to not marry. She knew no. And what was she bewailing? Her virginity. And it became a custom in Israel that the daughters of Israel went 4 days each year to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite, to lament or to celebrate her. She carried out her vow, or he carried out the vow. She was dedicated to the Lord for service to the Lord. She couldn't marry, couldn't have children. And this is why Jephthah was, he couldn't have grandchildren. His lineage would not continue. His lineage would not continue, and that was important. But I don't think there's enough evidence there to say that he killed her and offered her up as a burnt offering. There's just not enough evidence there to say that, because he carried out his vow with which he had vowed. She knew no man. See that? Okay. But others will say, well, he killed her so she couldn't have. But anyway, that's one of those Bible stories that I have difficulty with us teaching children who are in second or third grade. I don't necessarily think they're old enough to put their mind around that. But that's just my opinion. Okay. But I just think it's interesting here that we remember Jephthah for his stupid vow, and the Bible remembers him for his faith. David, yeah, we would remember his faith, wouldn't we? We have all the Psalms that he wrote and so on. Samuel, we would remember him. The prophets, of course. And look what it says they did, verse 33, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions. Did Daniel do that? Quenched the violence of the fire, yeah, okay. Escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong. Out of weakness were made strong. Did that happen to Samson? Yeah. Out of weakness were made strong. And became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again. And we remember some of those accounts. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, yes, and chains and imprisonment. Look at this. They were stoned. They were sawn in two. They were tempted. They were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, and tormented. So some of these faithful went through a whole lot. And notice it says in verse 38, the world wasn't worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, in dens and in caves of the earth. You remember Elijah for a while? And all these, he's looking back at all those in the Old Testament that we would remember. And all these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, look at this, did not receive the promise. They didn't receive the promise of, they didn't live on this side of the cross. They were over here. They didn't. But look at verse 40. God having provided something better for us. So is it too much that I might have to suffer like they did?
We might.
We might, yeah. And we ought to be prepared. And we have suffered some things, maybe not that awful, but they didn't receive the promise. God having provided something better for us, and then look at this last, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. That they're not complete apart from us. See, what about all that Old Testament? When we love God and serve God, when we are faithful to God, we complete their work. Their work was all preparatory to what is here and now. And we complete their work. That tells you that the Bible is one story. That tells you that God's eternal purpose is there, his great drama of redemption, as I like to call it. And that would be an encouragement to these people that the writer is writing to. Don't go back to Judaism. If you do, you are failing to complete their work. If you go back into Judaism, you're failing to complete their work. So we complete Moses' work. We complete David's work. That's a kind of a neat thing to think about. I always wanted to prove Fermat's last theorem, and I couldn't even touch the hem of the garment to the mathematics that it took to do that. And you don't know what Fermat's last theorem is, but it was a real famous thing that somebody finally proved just a few years ago. But I always thought that would be neat to prove Fermat's last theorem. What's the neatest thing? The neatest thing is to complete David's work, isn't it? complete Abraham's work, to complete Moses' work. That's a whole lot more important than doing Vermont stuff. You know. So, anyway, there may be some other things. In fact, next time you may have some questions or some thoughts that you have on this, but we'll try to get into chapter 12. And we're not going to meet the week of spring break, which is the 15th. Okay, Jean's got another song. And
Yes, I have a request from Sarah for 2:15. Hear me when I call. Number 215. Hear me when I call, oh God, my righteousness. Unto thee I call, in weakness and distress. Hold my trembling hand, lest I should fall. Oh, hear me, Lord, hear me. Oh, hear me when I call. Hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. More and more I need thy mercy and thy care. Clouds of doubt arise, and faith grows weak and small. Oh, hear me, Lord, hear me. Oh, hear me when I call. Hear my voice, O God, and cleanse my soul within. Mercy do I need, all my doubts and sin. Only in thy grace I trust my all in all. Oh, hear me, Lord, hear me. Oh, hear me when I call. Hear my prayer, O God. I need thy cleansing power. Let me feel thee near each moment of each hour. Hold my trembling hand, lest helpless I should fall. Oh, hear me, Lord, hear me. Oh, hear me when I call.
I was telling Jean about that song when I was driving over here, that I was singing that I was
singing and hear them.